Okay. Hello, everybody. We're here again. I'm here with my special guest today. It's a beautiful, beautiful Saturday afternoon here. And I have with me a beautiful group member. And she's so beautiful inside and out. She's decided to come and share with us something that has to do with the topic we're talking about in the group right now. Okay, so everyone, please welcome with me Amber James. She will tell us a little bit about herself and then she will tell us a story. People are already saying hello. It's a beautiful day. Okay, so Amber, just take it from here. Introduce yourself and help us. We're listening.
Okay. Okay. Just kind of give me a thumbs up. Everyone can hear me just fine. Okay. Um, like she introduced, thank you so much. My name is Amber James, and I'm a Texan. And so I, I don't generally speak publicly or things like this. And so I do feel a little nervous if you can hear it in my voice. And I may get a little emotional, but she told me we're in good hands. So I think it's a lot of nerves. But I, um, I wanted to share because I found your platform, My Mental Health Matters, to be a very special topic to my heart because I know how much mental health is important, and it's a very kind of taboo topic that a lot of people don't talk about and don't share. And I know that that is changing, and I want to be part of that conversation and part of that change, not just for myself, but to be an example for my children and to sort of, in a small way, be a voice for my late husband who didn't know these skills at that time either. And so I'll just, I guess, start from the beginning of I was married to my husband for 8 years at this time, and since the subject is mental health with infidelity, I want to just kind of share of how I found out about infidelity in my relationship. I again was in my marriage for 8 years. We had two children. Is it still okay? Okay, I'm hearing background noise. So anyway, I had only been with my husband. We were teenagers when we got together, and we had my son at 18 and 19 years old. And anyway, fast forward to 8 years later, my husband was in the military service, and he had been away, deployed to Iraq. And I always took care of my medical health. I had a well women's exam. We had a new child at that time. I had a 7-year-old and a less than 1-year-old. And I went to the doctor like I normally do to have my annual well women's. And I got a call from the doctor after that appointment, and I had never had anything abnormal. Again, I'd only been with one partner, my husband. I had never been with another man. And so I got the call from my doctor telling me that my pap smear had come back showing some abnormalities. And normally in this situation, what they do is it's very common, and they test you for HPV, and that's what they did for me. And basically, I was tested positive for HPV. And I'm on the phone, and I'm very confused, and I'm thinking to myself, what is HPV? And I asked him that, and he said, oh, well, it's a sexually transmitted disease that you can get. It's very common. Don't worry. Just come in. We'll have a procedure, and we'll go from there from step 2. And I just kept thinking to myself in that moment on the phone, my kids are playing in the back, my husband's in the background. I was just in shock. I was in shock, and I was confused, and I just knew in that moment, I thought, did my husband cheat on me? And I made the appointment with the doctor and the nurses, and then I hung up the phone, and I told my husband, I need to talk with you. So I took him into the bedroom, and I said, explained what the doctor had said, and my husband kind of had a confused, concerned look on his face, and then I asked him directly. I said, "Did you cheat on me? Did you have an affair while he was away?" I was pregnant right before his deployment, and I we were living in Hawaii and I had to move back home to Texas. I didn't have to, but I chose to. We chose to because I had never experienced war. I was having a child. They were 6 months old before they met, and I just needed my mom and my family. And so anyway, we had moved back to Hawaii, and I had just had my follow-ups and stuff. And so anyway, I knew that there was a couple of months prior to his deployment that we were not together, and I was pregnant in my third trimester. And anyway, I asked him, I said, "Did you cheat on me?" And he became defensive and was like, "No, what are you talking about? Absolutely not." And then sort of, I had kissed some other boys and kind of touched bodies, but never had intercourse with anyone prior to my husband. Again, we were teenagers. And he even kind of brought up, "Well, do you think it was, back then with this one particular guy?" And I'm thinking to myself, I've had pap smear. This is all going in my head, and everything is swirling, and I'm feeling like in shock, confused. I have an STD that you can only get through sexually transmission, and I don't really know what HPV is, but I'm just hearing the doctor say it can turn into cervical cancer, and I hear the word cancer, and I just remember I'm starting to really like spin out in a panic, and he's becoming defensive, and then he's becoming like, starting to kind of blame me that maybe it's something that I did a long time ago, and I'm just like, I don't know what's going on. And then he said, "Why don't we just we'll wait until after we see the doctor to find out what this all is, and let's just go and take the kids for a day on a hike." And we had never really done hikes in Hawaii at that time, and it's beautiful, and there's waterfalls, and so we thought it would be a nice thing to do. However, when I look at those photos, the whole time we're on that hike and we take these pictures, I'm thinking, and I look back at those photos now, and he's been passed away 7 years now, and this was back in 2007. And so this has been many years, but when I look at those photos, I can see in my eyes, the family smiling, he's smiling. I can see in my eyes. That's the day I found out my husband cheated on me, and he lied, and he still lied, and it was just like, wow. So fast forward, I go to the doctor's appointment, and the doctor has a student in there, and it's a military base, and that's kind of common to have someone else in the room, and so. But they were just talking, he's talking to her like a student, and I just remember feeling like embarrassment, shame, confusion, and he's just like, "Oh, her wellness thing came back showing, abnormal. We did the HPV test," which I never even agreed to, or, like I never got the information that my pap smear was negative, or, something was abnormal, and then this is what we do. It was just kind of like, this is what we do. They just went ahead and did this for me, and so and this doctor was kind of, he didn't have very good bedside manners, I would say that. He was just kind of matter of fact. And so I'm in my head processing again, this is a sexually transmitted disease. You can only get it sexually through a partner. I've only been with one partner. This is evidence my husband had an affair, and he denies it. And so I asked the doctor again, how do you get this? And I said, "I've only been with one partner." And he was just like, "Yeah, well," and it was kind of like, it was just very no empathy in that situation, and just felt like my privacy too was just, I don't know, I just felt completely out of control in that situation. And I remember leaving the appointment, and I had taken myself, and I just remember crying in the car thinking, I have a sexually transmitted disease that may or may not turn into cancer. My husband cheated on me, and I have family coming pretty soon to visit. My sister was going to get married there, and I can't tell my family. There's no way I can tell my family. He's not even admitting it. How can I bring this up and accuse him? And then my sister's getting married. I don't want to. This isn't the right time to bring something up like this. And so I go home and I ask him again. I say, "This is a sexually transmitted disease. You can only get it through sexual contact with a partner." And he became very defensive. And I said, in that time that I was away, did you, I understand these things happen. You're going to war. We've never experienced that. We've only been with one, each other. These things can happen. Like, I understand. Talk to me. And he became very defensive, very angry. "No, how can you accuse me of that?" Fast forward, my sister came and went, and he was very rude through that. And I was just kind of quiet and processing everything. So I wasn't myself around my sister either, and my family that were there, and they were just kind of like, I don't know. I just got some kind of flack a little bit about, why aren't, I don't know. I'm getting kind of off topic, but fast forward, my family leaves, and I just didn't feel like I could share with them what I knew as a fact. I have facts from a doctor that this happened, yet he's refusing to admit it. And now he's accusing me. Did you cheat? I started getting that, and the drinking, even after his time that he served, substance abuse became an issue that was just kind of a stressful thing to do. I had no family with me. I'm in a very big family, and we're very close. My parents, my siblings, everything, and living away from them in Hawaii, I had no support really. I had a small moms group that I had joined at this little church, and I confided into one of my friends there, like, I think my husband may be cheating on me or cheated on me, and I've got this HPV, and I'm so confused about it. I felt dirty in a way. I felt ashamed, embarrassed. And I just, the more and more that I tried to make my home calming, clean, I tried to even, I knew that he had done this, but he had led me to believe that it was all in my head, or it was something that happened years ago, or maybe I had cheated, and he was just became a little bit, he was never an aggressive man. He was very loving and great father, great provider, never cursed at me. And so this was just not in his character either. But he was.
Did he ever admit to it at some point?
Yeah. So fast forward, where I ended up becoming angry that he wasn't going to admit it, and I have proof. I'm not insane. I'm not crazy. I have this test that proves I have it. I'm going through these procedures, and he still refused to admit it. And I became angry, and I was like, get the hell out of my house. I don't want you here. And so he ended up going and staying with a military family friend. And so that was a separation that we had. But I didn't know anything about separating, and I just was like, get the hell out. So we had no conversations about what that means to leave. And then, so anyway, as he was gone for the couple of weeks, I'm noticing he's not helping me with the children anymore. He's going out more. I was becoming more angry and confused, and I remember one time, I needed some groceries, and he had the vehicle, and when I look back, I just think, why didn't I just stand up for myself? But I was young, I was in my earlier 20s, and I didn't have marriages to look up to. There was no mentoring families, I didn't even know who to call when he finally did admit. But back to the separation, I called him, and I was like, you need to get your ass back home. Excuse me for cussing, I apologize. But I was very direct with him, and he was a military guy, and he responded that way because I didn't talk to him like that very much. But I was just like, you need to get home and take care of our family. You're over there cooking for this other family and having time, and I'm over here, and we need food, groceries, and I need things. We have a young children. What are you doing? I'm your only family here, and you're treating me this way. Get home. And then I kind of, I don't know. And then he had come and gotten the kids. And so I sent a little photo book that we had from being teenagers to now, of just pictures of us, just to try to get through to him in some way. And I think that photo album reminded him of, wow, I don't know, something clicked for him, and he came home. But he came home and he passed out for that whole day. And that was kind of bizarre. Well, why he was so tired. But, I just figured work or whatever. And while he slept, I took his phone, and I always trusted my husband. But we had kind of an open topics about, you can always look through my phone, I'll always look through your phone. But he took my trustness, he took it for granted. And I just said, I need to check his phone while he's asleep. And sure enough, when I checked his phone, that's when I saw messages from this woman saying, hey babe, why are you pushing me away now? And I was like, again, this is evidence. I'm not insane. This didn't happen, And so I remember going into our bathroom and calling this woman and saying, who is this? And she's like, who is this? And I'm like, this is John's wife. And she knew the way that I said that. And this actually ended up being a coworker. I didn't even recognize her voice at that time because I was so I was just in so much shock and so much disbelief and shaking. I remember being, shaking on the phone thinking, oh my gosh, this is really happening. And he won't admit it. And anyway, he found out I was on the phone. He heard me talking on the phone and became very aggressive, being on the door and almost broke the door down. And I was like, we're living in housing. I don't want to, and we didn't fight like that with our kids. And so I opened the door and he took the phone and he immediately broke it. And I was just like, I have evidence now. This, and I read what the text message said, and he admitted. He said, "Yeah, I did do it." And I don't think he would have shared it had I not had that evidence to really put it in his face and say, "You gave me an STD. This woman is texting you. You can't deny it anymore." And sure enough, he said, "Yes, I did." And that was about all I got in that moment. But it also became very scary. He took a military K-bar knife and put it to his throat to threaten harming himself. And again, he'd never been violent like that, and it was very scary. And I'd never dealt with that. And then it was post his military time, and you get a lot of briefings and pamphlets that say, things are gonna be distant. Some people even get advice that affairs happen sometimes, and at least it's just sex and not emotional. And I mean, you just get a lot of conflicting stuff. This is back then. The stuff has changed now, thankfully. But I basically was told to ignore all my red flags, to ignore my intuition. And then when he had that K-bar to his knife, I was just very scared. And like, I've never dealt with that type of situation. And I don't know if you know, a K-bar knife is a very large military weapon knife, hunter knife. And anyway, I was able to calm him down by saying, our children are here. We'll work this out. Let's just, take a deep breath. And I was able to get the knife from him. And I immediately called a friend of mine that I had there. And I said, there's something very serious going on right now. I need to talk with my husband about. He may have cheated. And I need you to come and take my children for me. And thankfully she came and got them and took them for the afternoon. And that's when I was talking with my husband about what else, like, who is this? What, and he still would not give me her name. And would still not give me details, but he was like, starting to cry and was just, I'm sorry, I lied to you. I'm sorry this happened. And then admitted to trying to overdose on heroin the night before. And that's why he was so tired. And that was another shock. Like, I'm sorry, did you just tell me that you tried to OD on heroin? And when did you do heroin? You come home, you go to work. It was just like, who is this man? What is going on? I'm just spiraling out of control in my emotions. And so I called that small little church that I had gone to, and I said, I don't have family here. This situation happened. I don't know what to do. And they sent an assistant pastor over and his wife. And because we're not violent people, they came in kind of like as rushing in, thinking that there would be things thrown or, we'd be yelling at each other. And I was grateful to have them in that moment because my faith has been something that I've leaned on as far as nothing else making sense. But I could lean on my faith in that moment. And so fast forward, we end up getting orders to move. I ended up telling his commanding officer. I met with him privately and I shared everything that I had said and, about the affair, about the drug use, about his aggression and the drinking and these are concerns of mine after military service as well. And I'm just, what do I don't know what to do. And so he informed me of, off the record, we can, certainly things that he's done, we can have him demoted, we can have him put in jail, we can have him move out into the barracks. And all I kept thinking about was that woman's husband and how he became friends with my husband. We were friends, and he let my husband stay with him while we were going through our separation or whatever. And I just felt like, wow, that man must be, I just felt compassion for that other husband, and they had a new child. And I knew that anything that I did to get my husband in trouble would negatively affect me and my kids. We can't afford a paying decrease. I can't afford, I'm not going to put my children's husband in jail. I was still very much in love with my husband and just confused. And so
Amber, can I ask real quick? So
yes.
This other woman is another person's wife.
Yes, she was a coworker of my husband. She was a coworker. She was a military coworker, and she could also get in trouble. Yeah. And so when I had kicked him out, he went and stayed with them. And
With
so,
them. So
yeah,
he was actually seeing his wife, but he went to stay with them.
yes.
Did her husband know
He
about
did
it?
not know at the time.
Oh my
He did
God.
not know until I basically I called my family and I said, this is what was going on. This is why I couldn't, why I was acting strange or whatever. And talking to someone from home, my husband's dad died when he was a child, so we didn't have, like I said, healthy marriages to look up to, relationships to look up to. And so anyway, when I called, people that I knew, he looked up to, like my parents or his aunt, and I told them what happened. He felt ashamed about it, and anyway, I decided to fly home and really decide if I was going to stay in the marriage or not. I mean, I didn't see how I was going to stay, but then I I I again didn't know who to talk to or who to ask what to do, and so I decided I'm just going to talk to the two women that I trust, which is my mom and my grandmother, and this is what I shared in the quote or in the comments, and that was my mom told me no matter what, because I started to have obsessions about looking at other men's rings. I wanted to have revenge. I was just so consumed with anger and still embarrassment and how many other coworkers know, and just all of this has been. I'm still dealing with the HPV and feeling like I've got some disease, and then trying not to bring this, not to I knew that my relationship with my husband was separate from my kids' relationship with their father, because again, he was a great dad, a great provider, loving man, and it was like, what is going on? And so anyway, I decided to stay in the marriage and to work it out. But my mom had told me, whatever you do, keep your chin up. And to me, those words meant, because I told her I'm feeling like I want to cheat on him. I'm feeling I want to go f the whole bouquet. I was just like, I was so angry because again, I'd only been with one person, and and then just for him trying to make it sound like I did something wrong. And then when I was pregnant, it was one of the most vulnerable times I just felt like, my body had changed. Was he disgusted with me? Was it me? Which I know now it was not. It had nothing to do with me. It was him and where he was at in his mind. And so my mom always said, no matter what, you keep your chin up.
Keep your
And my grandmother told me, I never knew if she had experienced that, but she'd been with my grandfather many years, and I knew they had gone through a lot of hard things. And so I just said, I had never reached out to her like this, especially with something very personal. And anyway, my grandmother said, what she's learned in life is you have choices. And this is one of those times where you have a choice that no one can make. And right now it sounds like you have a choice to maybe stay in the marriage and hopefully fall back in love with this man, or you can leave the marriage and hopefully you'll fall in love with someone else. And I really just felt so conflicted and torn. And then at that time, we were trying to get orders to leave. My stepfather at that time had cancer, and we were able to get a position in Houston. And I was thinking at the time, I'm going to divorce. I don't think I can stay. But again, he was loving. He was a good provider. There was genuine friendship and love, and then most of the things that I would hear is like, oh, if that ever happened to me, I would leave. I never heard any positives about reconciliation and staying. But I also felt, through my faith that this was a way out. Like if I was ever going to leave the marriage, this is the time to do it. But I was just like, there was so much good in the marriage too, but the lying certainly wasn't good, and the making me feel like, I did something wrong. And anyway, and the drinking, I just so I,
So what steps did you at that point that you were torn in between? Should I stay? Should I go? I know that
so
you eventually stayed. So what were the steps
yes.
you took?
So we moved back to Texas, and we ended up talking to a marriage counselor right before we left Hawaii. And so I later found out some other things, that I didn't know in my marriage about my husband's mental health and even about my own, by taking on, I don't know if you're familiar or this community is familiar with codependency or people pleasing or not speaking up for myself. I just thought, I'm just going to work harder on my marriage. I'm just going to try to be, have sexier nights, and wear lingerie and put candles. And I just have to work harder. I have to work harder, or I have to do something that, but it was not me, which I later found. So anyway, we had advice from that counselor to say, what do you want to do? And I said, well, I don't know if I want a divorce, but I definitely don't want to live with him when I move back. And so that's when I learned about a separation with boundaries, a separation with goals, a separation with, that first time I kicked him out, I was like, we didn't talk about anything. It was just get the heck out. But the second time I moved in with my mom, we had a plan of, we're going to try the separation for 3 to 6 months or how, maybe sooner. We need to work on our work with a counselor individually. He's obviously dealing with some things from his time at war, and I'm dealing with, which I totally identify with trauma after this. And then, so we had a structure in play. We had, we were supposed to even do date nights, which I was so angry I didn't even want to, but he quit drinking completely. He really, I felt like, he even apologized to my family. I think he really tried to make it right and to take my anger, and I became just really an enraged, angry person for the next 4 years. But we decided to reconcile, and there was enough of the relationship to work on it, and we did have a family, and my parents divorced, and I didn't want that for my family, and so we did, and I have to say, he started to make an effort to try to find, there was still, my marriage ended in a suicide, so there was still, of course, some substance abuse that came back up when my father-in-law died, but at the time that we reconciled and then I agreed to come back in the home, there was no drinking. I felt safer. I felt he was really trying to communicate, really trying to explain what happened, although I never felt his explanation was the truth. I think he was trying to tell me what he thought I wanted to hear, or he didn't want to hurt my feelings, because I would ask very direct questions. And then it just kind of became, when he told me, it wasn't just sex, I was falling in love with this woman, I just was like, wow, this is even more than I even knew. Like, I think I could have been okay with it just being a sexual thing, but now you're talking about emotional. And then some of the timing and the wording, it didn't match up, and then I would become angry and enraged, and cursing him up, and just becoming irrational in my own, and becoming very depressed. And I started to struggle with my own depression, and so I was living with my mom, and she was in a toxic relationship, and I couldn't stay there. So I told my husband, I want to come back and I want to try to make this work, but I'm not sure how to do that. And so slowly, working through counselors individually, really trying to understand mental health. I started going to Al-Anon because he started to drink again, unfortunately, another year later, because he was triggered by his father-in-law dying, and we became hospice care. And my husband's father died tragically in his 30s from cirrhosis of the liver and from pneumonia. He couldn't fight it. His mother died of alcoholism, and my husband died of suicide. So there definitely was underlining. But my husband was an optimistic, happy person. He was always the life of the party. He was a great provider. So I didn't see the red flags, or I didn't know to see, these little red flags as the relationship was going on, as we were living life. And you have kids. We ended up having another child. And you get involved in life, you try to keep moving, but he would make efforts. He would find like a little marriage retreat, and he's like, I want to do it. And he would never share or try to do something like that. And I was just kind of like, whatever. Okay. I feel like I had kind of checked out of the marriage myself for a while.
Yeah, so I didn't want to, interrupt, but so no. After working through the whole thing, the structured, you first had an unstructured separation, then you relocated, you got a structured separation, you were comfortable where you were, and then you decided to come back home and work on it. And at that time, everything was going okay. And then you
Well,
had the issue of alcoholism or
so he I had agreed to come back because he had quit drinking for an entire year, and I saw a lot of changes in him, a lot of positive changes. And He was a very angry child. We were teenagers growing up, and so never violent towards me or his family, but a lot of fights with men or situations like that. And I just started to see. I knew that the situation staying with my mom in that situation, it became kind of unhealthy, and I started to go to these Celebrate Recovery, which was a small Al-Anon. I decided since I was going to stay in the marriage, I was going to have to figure out how to live with someone who struggles with this, because I loved my husband and I decided to stay. And he is a good provider. He did apologize, even though it was, I mean, I think for me, I had to rationalize the entire affair, all the details of the affair. It was just more painful to know some of the facts. And I know everybody deals with that differently and people want to know differently. And I think you have that right to ask and do what. But I just started to become a very angry person. And I just started to have, like, in the back of my mind, we ended up moving forward with plans to purchase a home and, just kind of move forward in our life is what we were going to do. But I always had in the back of my mind, like, an exit plan. I just didn't trust him. The trust was really gone. I started to, like, I guess, stalk her online. I not really stalk, but I guess they say you stalk when you look for somebody online and is she happy? Is she unhappy? I found out that they had divorced, and I was afraid that she still had some connection because my husband was still in the service, and we did have orders to another place, and I knew that she was in that location. So I still had this fear that she somehow had this power over my husband or over my relationship or something. So I was just dealing with my own mental health and anger, and still I started finding myself looking at other men's rings and just becoming a little irrational and unhealthy in my own self. And I know it got to a point, like 4 years after that, he was like, you can't treat me this way anymore. I tried to apologize. I tried to let you express yourself, but now you are being emotionally abusive to me, and that's not good either. And this isn't going to help the marriage. And then, with my husband's passing, it re-triggered some drinking and things. But I know, I'm sorry, my mind gets so, and it's been years, but basically I was going to say, I remember he was working out of town and we were talking on the phone, and it just sort of, like, it kind of came up. Sorry. The 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 infidelity came up. Like, we didn't talk about it every day, but we processed through it. We had seen a counselor, and we decided we're going to move forward in our relationship and just try to let time heal wounds, I guess. But I remember he was working out of town and I was feeling insecure about it and expressed that to him. And I felt like we now did have, I guess, better communication as far as we talked about my fears of infidelity or this, and so we had never, I never talked about it before my marriage, or no one ever told me, like, infidelity is something that is a common threat in marriages. I never heard any kind of education like that. But so anyway, I just remember him saying, one day that he really sees it for what it was. He was he was not in a place to see that the lies from both him and her, it was fantasy. And for whatever he said, it really just kind of helped me to know he saw it for what it was, which was, it was a fantasy of some sort. And, and we had a young child. He just got back from war. Like, there were a lot of things that created the mindset that he thought this would be okay. And then I also, learning as we went along, I didn't speak up for myself when he would leave and go to the bar or go hang out with friends. I just was like, well, he's my husband. And my husband was a very alpha personality, a very kind of macho man, very, I don't know. and I did like that about him because he always wanted respect and was a loving man. But I didn't realize that I don't know. I was kind of naive to that was me not standing up for myself, even for my husband. To have a voice to say to my husband, no, I don't want you to leave. No, don't leave on Halloween to go hang out at a party. You have a family. I just didn't have that voice at that time.
At that time.
To speak up for myself, yeah, or to say I'm not comfortable with this. This doesn't feel good, or no, I'm not going to be here when you get back, or
Yeah.
I didn't know those things because I didn't have a relationship or anyone showing me,
Yeah.
and so anyway, fast forward, I actually did fall back in love with my husband. He really made an effort to try, and it was really neat to be able to say, because again, I didn't have a lot of I had a lot of friends and stuff saying, I wouldn't stay, or I saw relationships that had dealt with infidelity that left. And it was just like, I felt really proud that we did make an effort to reconcile, even with the limited resources that we knew.
Uh-huh.
But unfortunately, I had a miscarriage in 2013. And my husband, I'm not really sure what was going on, to be honest. I know things from his time in war were starting to come up again, and the death of, and the stress of the family, the stress of his mom being sick and dealing with her own alcoholism. Like I said, she passed away from alcoholism, and there was a saying, I guess, in the military, when a parent dies, you're the man of the house. And I feel like that was kind of put on my husband. And it was just, I didn't realize the amount of stress that he had to deal with. And then his last year in the military was 1 year in Japan, unaccompanied. We couldn't go with him, and so that was a lot of stress on him. I had my daughter at that time; she had just turned 1. He left right before she turned 1, so those separations are very difficult. You're not there with family. He was very worried that I wasn't happy in the marriage. I was very stressed out. The substance had started to come back, and it was stressful for me because I didn't trust. I didn't trust when you're drinking. Is this going to happen again? And anyway, long story short, my husband had got out of the service and was trying to transition into oil and gas business, and was doing very well, and had been working out of town for like 2 weeks. And marriage is tough. You have your good and your bad, and then you're easily triggered, I guess, and at this point we've been together 15 years, and so had another child and decided to move forward, and I don't know, but it was always in the back of my mind, the fear of this could happen again, or has it happened more than once. And anyway, unfortunately, he came back from being out of town for 2 weeks, and it was just hit or miss. I'm tired, I'm overwhelmed with the kids, and I just didn't have any empathy for my husband at this one moment. But we got to go to a concert, and it was during the week, and we had a great time at this concert, and we got into a small argument on the way home, and we had been drinking, and you know what buttons to push when you've been together that long. And so I threatened divorce. I'm not afraid to leave, and I was even going to threaten to throw my ring out the window, but I knew I wasn't going to leave him, and so I ended up throwing it in the back of the van, which, again, we weren't violent, we didn't do that kind of stuff, but I think it was the drinking that put me in that kind of mind space. And something snapped and something changed in him. He kind of yelled at me, like, again, he wasn't that kind of person. And he yelled at me sort of like a primitive scream, just like he was so frustrated, like, "Rah!" But in a very intense and very military. It was just very, very odd. And we picked up our children, and from my brothers, and then we don't argue in front of the kids, so we just kind of were like, all right, let's deal with this tomorrow. Let's just calm down. And we get home, and he said, let's just let all the children sleep in the bed tonight. And I thought it was because we had this argument. We were trying to have a good time on this date, and here we're having a bump in the road again. And basically he he went in first, and then I came in after, and I still I was going to grab a T-shirt to just put on, and he was kissing all the children goodnight in the bed, and then I remember he walked by me. I don't remember him touching me or saying anything. I just remember him giving each kid a kiss goodnight. We never let them all sleep in our bed, but again, I thought it would be because we had this argument, and so I thought, well, I'll sleep in the kids' room, and let's just get through the night, and we'll go to work tomorrow, and then we'll work it all out. We've been through plenty already, and basically what happened was he walked out of the room, went and got his handgun, and took his life in the kitchen. And heard this loud noise, and I was just surprised because again, we don't throw things, and it sounded like, did he throw something through the window? And I heard this loud crash and this fall, and it wasn't my first thought to think that this was a gunshot. And so then when my oldest one woke up and was like, what was that? And I was like, oh, don't, go back to sleep, because he was 14 at the time, and always kind of like, what's going on with mom and dad? Are y'all good? Are y'all not? And kids are very intuitive, and the other two were sleeping through it. And the way that the house is, it kind of muffled in a way. But so, yeah, I went into the kitchen, and that's when I found my husband had shot himself. And my first thought was, he did it. He really did it this time. And I'd never had, over the 15-year marriage, I maybe had like a red flag here, a red flag there. But again, he was like such an optimistic person, and I didn't understand mental health at that time. I didn't understand suicide. I didn't understand, even if you have warning signs, or even if someone confesses, like he told me at the time that I found out about the affair, he had confessed to trying to OD on heroin. And I'm just like, what? What do you mean heroin? Where are we getting heroin? What's, and then not knowing, but that was my very first thought, was he did it. And then my very second thought was, don't scream, don't panic, get out of the house right now, get the children out of the house right now. And unfortunately, that turned into a whole nother story that was just very traumatic. But just having to deal with all of that and face all that, and of course I just had so much confusion about, I decided to stay. I thought we were trying to work on the marriage, and then he abandons me again completely. Like, it was just your whole world, for me, my whole world just crashed, and just completely, it was just, I just didn't feel like I trusted anybody or anything. Even my family, my parents, I didn't trust them. It was just, it was just chaos. It kind of felt. And then now it was a very public thing with my family. You must have had issues in your marriage again, or you must have, and then, so it's been 7 years since he passed away, and I've been on my own kind of mental health recovery since this. And I knew from his parents' death, and the way that they dealt with grief and death, and the way that they dealt with stress, and I knew when he died, I have to deal with this differently. I really need to deal with this internally. I need to, I have 3 children that I need to be very, my mental health is very important. And it just kind of, I learned forgiveness through the infidelity. I really did. I truly feel that situation prepared me to really understand what unconditional forgiveness means. I'm sorry, what forgiveness means. And forgiveness doesn't mean that you forget. It means that you almost release your own pain and your own. I think there has to be some trust. There has to be some truth to someone who does cheat. I think there has to be some level of truth for reconciliation. I think there definitely is hope for reconciliation. Even knowing how this all ended, I'm proud of my husband and I for trying to reconcile and trying to, find resources that we didn't have. And that's why I think it's so important to share my story sometimes, even though it's very difficult. And I leave out some of the very details. And so, I don't mean to trigger anyone or anything like that, but witnessing those things, it's very traumatic. It's very difficult. I now struggle with post-traumatic stress disorder, anxiety, depression. I also have ADHD, which all my emotions are sort of like went into this heightened state, and now trying to regulate those and then trying to be a healthy mom for my children and to show them that just because difficult things happen in life, your mental health is important. And what is mental health? You know, we're so we talk so much about physical health. You know, if you break a bone, you go to the doctor. Well, there's a lot of mental health that is just as important. You know, if you're thinking of hurting yourself, you know, if you have a plan to kill yourself, I think it's natural sometimes to think about death, and even to maybe once in a while cross your mind. I know as a teenager, I thought about suicide, or I looked at the razor thinking, you know, I could break this apart and I could cut myself, but I didn't really ever want to do that. But it was a curious thought, I think, that maybe is natural or can, you know, I don't know exactly, but now I know when my husband died that way, I was not going to live with lies. I was going to be honest with my children. We were all there, so I wanted to be honest with them that this was suicide. What is suicide? Suicide is, you know, a decision to take your life, and why. The children asked very specific questions. Why? And I'm like, you know, honestly, I don't have that why. We didn't have a note. We were having a good night that just turned into, you know, an argument that wasn't, he didn't kill himself because of the argument. I mean, of course I had a lot of guilt, a lot of just, I don't know. It's just, there's so much more to explain something in such a short time. But I know that, I learned from him, and I learned from my mother-in-law, and I never met his father. But, you know, I also think my children are the legacy of that tragic family that all, you know, they both died in their 30s. His mother died in her 50s. And I don't want to, like, how can I, they did love their family. How can I make this right? And it's not for me to make it right. It's for me to be an example to them of, this is why it's important to take care of your mental health. This is why it's important to take care of your physical health. And they go hand in hand. It's your whole body. And reaching out and learning to speak up for myself, to say, I'm not okay. This was very tragic. This was changed my entire life. My family, I didn't want to change my family. I thought we were on the good, but then there's anger of abandonment and, you know, what the heck, you know, did I waste my time? But no, I think I'm proud of what we tried to do. And now I understand that you know, someone who takes their life, it's you hear so much negativity stuff too. And my understanding of it now is, I wasn't a professional counselor. My husband wasn't a professional counselor. It's very hard for men in military or men in general to express their emotions and their feelings. It's kind of viewed as a weakness. And I just want to be a part of that conversation to say that it's not a weakness. You're human, and we're human. And I'm raising two sons, and I even have been confused on, do I share, like it just recently came up, my 14-year-old. So again, I think like this is the worst that could ever happen, right? And then unfortunately my 14-year-old had to battle brain cancer. And you think, something else? Really? I got to go through brain cancer now? And he's doing great. He's there's, you know, his latest scans, we've been dealing that with 2 years. He had 2 surgeries and radiation, and but he's doing fabulous. But one of the times after his appointment, we would go have like a special lunch, just him and I, and give him one-on-one time. And he didn't know that his dad and I had separated. He didn't remember. He was young at the time. And so I was like, yeah, when we got back from Hawaii, we moved in with Mana, and Dad had his place. And he was like, why? What? And then I'm thinking to myself, because I always want to be honest with them now, because the lying in my marriage and in my history, it never solved anything. But I also don't want to be disrespectful to my husband's memory. You know, my husband is not here to defend himself. That's why I was very kind of nervous to share this. What do I share? Have I overshared? You know, but I think I think my husband would say it's okay to talk about, there was substance abuse. He was dealing with his own things from war that I don't understand. I didn't go to war. But now I understand there's many things that contribute to a mindset of making a decision like that. Did he have proper sleep? What was, you know, medications that he was on prescribed, but then was there something else not prescribed that made a combination? There are triggers of marriage, you know, So I've learned now, for my own self, I've learned about thought management work, emotion management work, which is self-coaching. I became certified as a self-coach. I even did a coaching course with intimacy, sex and intimacy, because I really struggled with connecting with new relationships. Trying to date in my 30s has been something very new. Really trusting. Am I going to know if someone's lying to me? Am I going to know if, red flags of someone else's mental health? Like, I just try to be honest with myself and patient with myself, and, really try to give myself self-love and self-care. And it's not easy, it's not easy, especially if you haven't been taught. We're taught that other people are responsible for our emotions. You hurt little Sally's feelings, you need to apologize. When in fact, we're the ones that are in control of our own emotions. Someone can say something, but we internalize it, we think about it, and then we have a reaction to it. I didn't know those skills. My parents weren't taught those skills, and then again, I was sharing with you about, I had a conversation with a coworker of mine who, is a Black woman who, we became friends and sharing in our different cultures and things. And she knew about my husband's, because I also volunteer with a military bereavement group, and they work with active duty loss military or suicide loss. And so I try to mentor other widows, and just to be compassionate and just to be patient, and then just to understand that I think we can get obsessed about why did he cheat on me? Why did he kill himself? Why did someone do this to me? Why was, and sometimes we're never going to get those answers. And so you have to come to terms with that. And a lot of it has to do with finding your own healthy mental state. I decided to stay with my husband even when he was struggling with his substance abuse. And so that's when I was like, okay, if I'm going to stay and decided to stay with this man, then I need to go to Al-Anon. I need to find resources to help me be strong in that relationship where my mental health is not affected, But nobody taught me these things. And I was so scared to go to those meetings. Nobody's going with me. I have no friends or sisters or family going. And it's like, okay, I'm scared. I have to go in here and talk to somebody. And I was like, okay, you just go in, you listen to the meeting, and then you can get the heck out. And then I was like, the next time I'd be like, okay, you can go and you can go get a cup of coffee. You still don't have to talk to anybody, but just get out. And then it was just like slowly baby steps, and then just reading and reading. And I learned about AFSP, the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention. Just reading all late up at night. I can't sleep. I struggle with insomnia. So I'm up late at night, And then again, I want to be an example to my children that just because difficult things happen to you in your life, you have a choice to how you will respond. And a lot of that is self-care. A lot of that is mental self-care, and now I'm learning that words can be scary. Suicide, I remember it was just caught in my throat when I first talked about it. And now I teach laughter yoga at suicide seminars, and we're laughing for no reason, because who wants to laugh about suicide? So let's laugh for no reason. And then we all just needed a good laugh, and it's contagious laughter that creates natural serotonin and dopamine. And, and so that's why I can share, my story. And that's why I loved your platform, that your questions kind of, I don't know. And I learned about, taking responsibility for my own mature, what was it? I don't even know how I put it, but emotional adulthood. I learned about that, as adults, we can throw our own tantrums, right? I'm mad at you for doing this to me, and I'm going to pout and do, that's not emotional adulthood. But I was never taught about emotional adulthood. So this has been a long journey of just really trying to understand mental health. And it's there was a combination of things that created my husband to feel like he, needed some attention outside of the marriage, but it had nothing to do with me. It took me many years to understand that. And then I also now taking a sexuality course to help with my own with my own intimacy, I've learned that there are many types of personalities. There's a woman, Jaya, the Erotic Blueprints. She just kind of like personality tests. She also has she's a sexologist, and she's done a lot of amazing things with body work, somatic work. I was so much in my head with all of this that I became detached from feeling in my body. And so now I've learned tools through that somatic work, that our bodies have natural responses sexually. And I didn't know this when I got married. Nobody ever shared it with me, but we have different responses sexually. And so I wish I would have known, the type of sexual personality that my husband was. Maybe I could have communicated better. Maybe, he could have communicated better. But I now know for any future relationships that I do go forward, I have a voice to say, I'm not someone that I'm not in a relationship that is not honest. I do struggle with mental health, but I'm proactive in my mental health. I don't know. It's just kind of like these things. I don't know if I'm getting off topic, but
I
I
mean,
know that I'm an emotional, I want to be an emotional adult about my role that I played in that. And it wasn't that, I was lied to. And so that's not my fault for being lied to. I was deceived. My trust was taken advantage of by my husband, and not all men are that way. So I have to remember to try to work through my thoughts with that, when it does come up, which it does come up, I like doing this interview. I thought I had already dealt with this stuff. And then
yeah,
here I'm panicking, and I wanted to cry before I came on, and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, is this going to be so disrespectful to my husband? I'm sharing a lot of private things,
yeah.
but sharing, sharing, it takes away the isolation that you're alone in this. I thought I was the only one that had ever dealt with infidelity until I dealt with it, and then it's like, no, it affects so many marriages. I wish people, when you were getting married, maybe we wouldn't even listen at the time because we're so in love and we think it'll
Yeah.
never happen, or we're young and we're naive. Same thing with suicide. He had said some things that made me wonder, but I still don't have control over someone else. I cannot stop someone from harming themselves. The only one that I have control over is myself, my thoughts, my emotions. And so that's how I help myself to have, to be confident, to have a conversation with my husband if I feel he's cheating, or if or if, because I know there's different cultures that, have, open relationships or something but these are conversations that I never knew to have.
Yeah.
And so I feel confident now moving forward that this was my relationship then. This is not my relationship moving forward. I now understand my own voice with what I will and will not, allow. I understand boundaries now. And so it's just been kind of like a learning for myself, and there's so much information online. Groups like this is a private group that I feel safe to share. If you don't have friends and family to talk to, they didn't have platforms like this when I was dealing with all of this. And so that's why I'm so great that you have this platform. You can share in this group. Usually I have found when I do share or I'm having a really bad day, people are compassionate. And I'm so grateful to that, And so if my message or story has helped anyone give you hope that, maybe your marriage doesn't last, or is able to reconcile, but you can still reconcile your mental health, and you can still understand, like maybe come to some understanding of why this happened, or, because I didn't want to completely blame my husband, because I felt, what role did I play? And what I played is I didn't stand up for myself and say no, and now I'm able to do that. I wasn't able to recognize how much substance abuse affects families, and anyway, I don't know if it's getting loud, but
Yeah, no.
so I'm kind of not sure where to end with this, but I, just really learning to speak up for myself, learning to really have self-compassion for myself, learning to, on really dark days when I'm up and I can't sleep, journaling, I used to write some of the most angerish thing, you know, like, and I'll share with you again. I had some very, very dark thoughts about, you know, he did all this to me, and I was a good wife to him. I should just burn every picture. I should just never share any story, because my children were 3, 7, and 14 when he passed, and then they were 1 and 7 when the infidelity happened. And then now I'm actually someone thought that it would be good to share with me that maybe, hey, he had another affair, and you didn't know about it, and hey, did you know about this and that? And I'm thinking, this is 7 years after my marriage. How is this helping me?
Yeah.
And then that's when I was like, well, I
Mhm.
don't have to, you know, like, because I started to get angry again, and it's bringing up all these things. And I'm like, what did I not know?
Yeah.
And then I'm getting angry again. I'm like, I just want to burn your memory, and you don't deserve my children's. And then it's like, no, that's
Yeah.
irrational.
Yeah.
You're upset.
Uh-huh.
Process my emotions.
Yeah.
You know, I've learned tools. I've learned to breathe through things. I've learned to, and then I don't get it right some days. You know, some days I'm angry and I shout out and I, you know, this is all your fault, even though it has nothing to do with my husband. You know, it's not his fault the grocery line is long, or, you know, I
Right.
mean, so
Right.
humor, you know, I've had to use humor too to find my ways, but I'm grateful that you gave me the opportunity to share. I hope that this, you know, no affair is fun. They're all very, you know, it's difficult. Life is very difficult, you know.
I want everyone on the platform to please, just say thank you to Amber for coming to share this with us. Amber,
Thank you.
I mean, we talked sometimes during the week, it was, and since that time till now, we've communicated a lot, and it's been really challenging, even looking forward to
It is.
sharing this. And even before we got on live,
Yeah.
but look, see, we did it, and you were just
Yeah.
so
I
excellent.
was so scared.
You did excellent. And I just want everybody to know that, you went through that emotional turmoil even years after. But through it all, you're still able to share your story to help other people, encourage other
Yes.
people, and let them understand that they're not alone. I'll
Yes.
try to articulate a lot of things that you put here, the guilt, the anger, the revenge, depression, exit plan, the rage, everything. I will try to put it there. And then you shared a lot of tips with us on what helped you, the journaling, the self-care, the laughter yoga, seeking help, counseling, paying attention to your mental health and prioritizing that. And the pain of suicide and all those things you shared with us, I personally do not take it for granted. I'm sure everybody on the platform also appreciate this. And when we're done, just look at the comments. There are people saying thank you. There are people saying you're a strong woman. There are people saying you talked about forgiveness. I mean, people are saying good things, and there's so many people sorry that you went through that painful journey. But we're glad you're with us. We're glad you're in our group. We're glad you're courageous enough to share this with us. And please, I want you to know you're a resource to us in the group. People will reach out to you, maybe even off
Sure.
the platform. And I know that it won't just end here. You haven't shared this for fun. It's for something even better to come. So, everyone, please say thank you to her. Say thank you. Let's show Amber some love. We
Thank you.
will thank you to
You know,
wrap us up.
I
And
was sharing. I wanted to just say one last thing I forgot, because I have I have a multicultural family too. My grandmother's Puerto Rican, which people would not know. And then my grandfather was a very tall, white, redheaded man, and my grandmother was short Puerto Rican woman. But my husband's wife is Ukrainian. My cousin, who's like a brother, his wife is Japanese. And then, but I was sharing with a coworker about how the cultures are different, and my friend was sharing, and I had mentioned to you. She was at, we got to talking about this subject, and I feel very much like an advocate to change starts with conversations. And if I have to be the first one to raise my hand and share, I will, but I might be crying or get lost in my track. But so my friend was she's a Black woman, and she told me after I shared, in her culture, it's I was sharing with you, so I'm getting kind of lost, but she was saying, oh, that's a that Mental health is
mental
not.
health is a white people's
Yes.
problem, that it's
Yeah.
people
And I
that
never
have
heard
mental
that.
problems.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'd never heard that. And I was like, what do you mean? I was like, of course, suicide affects everybody. Infidelity affects everybody, and she was like, yes, but we don't deal with it that way. And I was raised, where we didn't have medical insurance, and I didn't go, to doctors either. And I didn't have, but it was neat that me just sharing opened up a dialogue between our cultures, and how she knows that mental health actually does affect her culture. And I don't know, it was just a beautiful thing that we were able to express, and just to understand each other a little bit more. And so that's
Yeah.
why I'm grateful too that, I did mean to share that. And so then I only brought it up a little, and then I was like, oh gosh, what, my mind gets so distracted. But thank you, everyone, again, anybody that listened or watched, and thank you for being here for me. I'm glad that you sticked by, because I was feeling scary to be alone in this. But I always, when I share, I know it's a benefit, and I know it's something higher than myself. This interview didn't, just happen. I felt compelled to reach out and be honest with that. My mom gave me advice, and my grandmother gave me advice to hopefully show someone else, because I didn't have mentors, in my situation. And so I'm grateful that you have this platform that people can talk about this, because, just like before, no one talked about cancer and it was a whisper. Mental health is there. It's just a word. Suicide's just a word. Schizophrenia is just a word. Infidelity is just a word. They're very triggering words, but they also are just words. And, we can say them, and it's freeing when you do say these things. And so in safe spaces, when you have a safe place to share these things, it really does help you to release yourself, to feel you're not alone. And so thank y'all for, and then this was healing again. I guess I needed to get it out again. So
Thank
I
you.
forgive you, John,
Thank
and I
you.
forgive the woman, and I forgive, it's a continuous forgiveness, but forgiveness of myself too. And then I'm human, and it's okay to get upset about it again, because it hurt.
Yeah, it hurts. It hurts. It hurts really, really bad.
Yeah.
It hurts. So thank
But
you.
there is healing,
Yeah.
yeah, my family and I are, we find joy, we laugh a lot, you know, we it's different, but I, I need to find the word fun a little bit more, but that's what people tell me. But I'm like, this is kind of fun when I get to talk and share with people, although it's a deep conversation. But I'm grateful that I met you. I wouldn't have met you like this. So anyway, but thank you all again for letting me share my story. And, if anybody, wants to private message or talk, or share, I'd be more than happy to encourage you that, healing is possible, and with all kinds of things. Like I said, I ended up dealing with cancer with my son, and I'm just like, what? And you got to face that, and you just face it one day at a time, and you do the best that you can, and you find your own way. And everybody's healing, and everybody's stories are different, but the stories are important to share, because it helps us to connect with each other, and you're not alone,
Right.
and it's nice to know you're not alone.
Right.
So,
Right.
but thank you again.
Thank you. We thank you.
You're
On
welcome.
behalf of I think we're 2,800 members in this group now. On behalf of
Cool.
every single one of us, I say thank you for sharing this with us. So all those who watch, thank you so much. I'm not able to mention names now, but we thank you. We love you. And I will see you again next week. Thank you, Amber.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.